Hey, how's it going? It is Tuesday, May 12th, and this is the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. We're on YouTube, so make sure to subscribe. Follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. Today we'll get some coronavirus updates, an epidemiologist in Sweden explaining how they're dealing with the coronavirus, and how do we deal with missions and jobs when we don't feel like doing it anymore. So, how are you guys doing? It is already Tuesday, but actually not just already Tuesday, it's already the middle of the month. It's May 12th already. But the good thing is we're doing it together here on the Morning Star Drive. Keep liking, keep commenting. I want to hear from you guys and see how you're doing. And remember, last Sunday edition, we met Pastor David Baker. Great interview, lots of stories between him and the Lord, spiritual stories too. Be sure to catch up on that on the Sunday edition. And just a gentle reminder, remember that this YouTube channel has changed from Latte with Sky to MSD 117.8. And of course, the reasoning is we got to get rid of the confusion between the two channels because people are getting confused which channel to share with newcomers. And some great news for you guys. The Sumney Boys will be releasing a new album on June 5th. And guess what? We will have the exclusive look at one of the songs on the album before the release date, and you're going to hear it first on the Morning Star Drive. Now, let's get into the featured artist of the day. Featured artist of the day. Today, we're going to feature a Taiwanese-born classical and jazz pianist in New York. We all know him as Francis Han. He has his own group. He's professional. He's got his own album already. He's been a member for 3 years and just had this amazingly cute baby daughter, Leah. You guys have to see the pictures. She's so, I don't know. When I look at both Francis and his wife, Chloe, they're both like models. And basically, Leah's going to be like the next chosen one. I'm pretty sure of it. You just got to meet him, right? Francis Han, we're gonna hear the song called, guess what it's called? Morning Star. Same as this show, so it's going to be a good one. And of course, it's inspired by this history. And the second song is from Taiwan, a new artist I found on SoundCloud called Ideal Life. And I'm going to find out more information on this soon. And the single we're going to hear is in Chinese, and it's called Only Love. And in Chinese, please forgive me if I get this wrong, it is Wei Yu I. Is that right, guys? Those of you who are Chinese out there, Wei Yu I. I'm hoping I'm right. If just comment in the section if I'm wrong, right? Wei Yu I. So everyone, let's just sit back, relax. We're going to hear some jazz music from Francis Han. The song is Morning Star, and the second song from Taiwan is in Chinese from the group Ideal Life, and that song is called Wei Yu I, or Only Love. Only Love for My Ideal Life. I believe that group is from Taiwan, and the first one was from New York, a Taiwanese-born classical and jazz pianist Francis Han with the jazz song, which was super relaxing, and it kind of made me think that I was like in the subway or like kind of driving in New York, seeing all the buildings pass by. So it was really surreal for me. But that song was Morning Star, and it looks like maybe that's like a pre-dawn song, possibly. I don't know. Either way, I'm gonna ask him about that song too to see what the inspiration behind that song was. So we're gonna move on to, of course, our coronavirus updates. So let's see what's going on around the world with the coronavirus. There are 4.2 million cases in the world with around 285,000 deaths. The U.S. has about a third of all cases in the world, and they have 1.37 million cases with 81,000 deaths. The mortality rate is still relatively low. It's under the global average and is at 5.9%. Russia is just creeping up. They are now in third place. They are now ahead of Italy, and so is the UK. They've both gone ahead of Italy in cases. Russia's at 221,000 with 2,000 deaths, and the UK is just behind at 219,000 cases with 32,000 deaths, and they are at 14.5% mortality rate. So it's interesting now. Italy is kind of really flattening off, and they are now fourth with cases instead they were usually third, right underneath Spain. France is interesting. France is slowing down a lot. Their cases haven't gone up very far, and neither have their deaths. They used to be ahead of the UK, but UK is far ahead of them now. UK has about 50,000 more cases and 6,000 more deaths than France now. And France is still at a high clip, though, at the mortality rate of 14.9%, but they're at 177,000 cases, 26,000 deaths, and they've slowed down a lot. Brazil's one of I believe, the third largest growing in cases with 163,000 cases, 11,000 deaths. And so far, they're around the global average of around 6.8% in the mortality rate. Also, we look at Sweden. We want to keep a close eye on Sweden, mainly because we'll talk about them today, but Sweden is one of the only countries that's not doing a full lockdown, and they're just protecting those that are susceptible, like the elderly and those with pre-existing conditions. And at the moment, they're at 27,000 cases with 3,300 deaths, around 12.2% mortality rate. So it's pretty interesting because, they're not doing a full lockdown, and they've been pretty relative and not so bad with the coronavirus as of this moment. When it comes to easing restrictions, a lot of Europe is easing their restrictions, even the UK, even though they have a really bad mortality rate and their cases and deaths are going up really high. But something that's very, very interesting is sports are about to start up once again, probably around this month and either the middle of this month. Some have already started, and some are going to start at the end of the month. Now, it doesn't mean that the games are starting. It's just the training facilities are opened up. And one thing we do know is these are highly trained athletes, very, very healthy, which means that the chances of any of these players getting anything close to dying from the coronavirus is almost next to zero. But of course, they're doing social distancing with their practices. I believe all players are staying 6 feet apart and whatever. But sports is kind of opening up around the world, in the U.S. and Canada, Germany, Spain, Australia. And they're basically just opening up training facilities. And in the U.S., just last weekend, they had a major sporting event with no fans. And it was the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And there's no fans. And it was basically just the fighters and the trainers and the people working the camera and the commentators. And it was done fairly, I just saw clips of it. It was done fairly well, and I heard it was very, very exciting too. So it's interesting how some things are slowly coming back to normal, but it's kind of what you call a new normal. It's a new normal because it's not going to be anything close to what they had before. All right, so let's move on to the next section. So that brings us to the kind of the current events news portion of this broadcast. And today we're going to go over this interview that was with the former Swedish chief epidemiologist. His name is Johan Giesecke. And for those of you who don't know, an epidemiologist is someone who works in the public health. He's a public health professional. He investigates the patterns and causes of diseases and injury in human beings. And their whole job is to try to reduce the risk and occurrence of negative health outcomes through research, community education, health policy. And Johan Giesecke is actually considered one of the most senior epidemiologists in the world today. Okay, so this guy's not just an ordinary person. He was the chief epidemiologist of Sweden. Okay, and he's going to talk about what is happening right now in Sweden and what he sees in about 100 of the other countries in the world that are locking down. So he says, is it wrong to lock down? And he says it's not all wrong. Right? The way we do lockdown is not all wrong. But he's very interested to see how the other 100 countries are going to fare after they come out of lockdown. Because one of the things he brought up was, yeah, all these countries went into lockdown, but none of the countries really thought about how are you going to get out of the lockdown. And one of the things he brought up was like even closing schools for these kids. Like, how are you going to open them up again? In what way? And that's something that countries should have already been thinking even before they closed them. So in Sweden right now, what kind of measures do they have? They do have social distancing. For instance, gatherings cannot be more than 50 people. And also, when you go to a restaurant, tables are 5 feet or 1.5 meters apart. But you got to know that there's very few laws to stop people from doing it because there's a lot of trust with the government and the people trust the government. So one of the things he said is, he's like, people aren't stupid. So if you tell them what's good for them, right, and good for their neighbors, they'll do it because people are normally sensible. And one of the things he did say is, in the end, the results will be similar. Regardless of the approach you have, it'll be similar deaths. So it's kind of like what's happening now with the coronavirus. It's basically like a tsunami of mild infections around the world. Because, the majority of the infections are not harmful. So most of the people in the world are going to be infected, and most of the people won't even notice that they're infected. So the data shows that 98 to 99% of the cases are very mild, or you won't even realize you're infected. That's 98 to 99%. So the spread of the disease is going to happen no matter what. And most people aren't even going to know what's happening. So very few will notice, and even fewer will be greatly affected. So what we have, right now people are trying to flatten the curve, which is really good because it's good for the healthcare system. So it's not overrun with too many people, not enough beds, not enough ventilators. But the question that comes up to all the countries that are locking down, as Dr. Giesecke brought up, is what do you do next? Because even if you eradicate all of it, then do you ban all travel from other countries? Because other countries are not going to completely eradicate it. Like, are you going to stop all travel then? Because what's going to happen is once the travel opens up again, then it's going to keep spreading again and again. You see, in the end, Dr. Giesecke says, everyone's going to end up with similar fatalities. The epidemic is invisible and it is happening everywhere. So even after lockdown, no matter what, cases will rise again. And you're going to end up with the same results, right? So one of the things that he was against was the modeling that was brought on by the London Imperial College. And because of, these were the modeling, these stats were telling us like, oh my gosh, 2.4 million people are going to die in America, like 150, 200,000 people are going to die in the UK. And this is actually even why the UK was originally doing Sweden's, the same as Sweden. But they decided to change after they saw this paper that was published. But he says the reason why you can't really trust it, because the paper was actually never published. And normal scientific behavior, if it's really a real paper, it's got to be published. And secondly, this paper was not peer reviewed. Like someone else look at it, go over it and see if it's right or wrong. So this paper, this modeling that was brought up by the London Imperial College, number one is it was never published, and number two was never reviewed. So it's like, it's kind of weird. It's not even normal scientific behavior, but why are people trusting it? So it almost looks like it's just in an internal department communication or a memo that was given internally. But the thing that kind of baffles Dr. Giesecke is how can this paper that's not peer reviewed, never published, change the policy of the world, which is very interesting to him. And and another thing is one question was asked to him is, what is the real fatality rate? And he says, it's gonna be more than the flu, but not much more. So probably around double of the flu. And the flu is about I believe it's 0.1%. It's like a tenth, right? I think it's a tenth or a percentage. Yeah, so it's very low. So he says that at max it'll be double, which is like zero point 0.2 or 0.02, I believe. But it'll not be what people say, like it's going to be 10 times the amount, right? So what's going to happen is because people are trying to flatten the curve and doing a lockdown, one of the things that is causing, even in Sweden right now, is there going to probably be more deaths because of other illnesses. And what does that mean? It means that because of other cancers and heart attacks. And the reason is because the hospitals are so focused on the coronavirus, they're not doing other surgeries and they're not doing other things. And people don't want to go to the hospitals because they feel like, oh no, we're going to catch the coronavirus if we go to the hospital too. So people are actually avoiding the hospitals. And he said in Sweden, like the larger hospitals, their intake of patients is down 50%. People are just scared to go into the hospitals. And most of the resources are all being used towards the coronavirus. And this is why you're going to have deaths happening from other, people skipping chemotherapy for their cancer, people skipping checkups, which is not a very good thing, right? So the best policy that they're doing right now in Sweden is what? They are actually only using measures that are evidence-based, okay? Now you have to understand what this means is that it has to be proven by evidence before they actually do it. And that's why they won't do the lockdown, because there's nothing proven to make everyone go into lockdown. So the two biggest things that are proven, number one is washing hands, and number two is social distancing. And those things are already happening in Sweden. And of course, the third thing that he brought up, which is very important, is there needs to be a trust between the government and the people. And the government must trust the people, tell them what's good for them, and they need to be the ones that handle it in the best way. Right? So it's very interesting because we're starting to see there's a lot of blowback to having such a harsh lockdown, because like there's this big war about, is it destroying the economy? And the answer is, even when you destroy the economy, you're actually destroying lives too. People losing their jobs. Maybe 30% of the people will close their businesses, restaurants. And that's not a healthy thing either, because already just in America itself, it's already up to like 15% unemployment rate, which is up 11 points. Now, if it's up 11 points, times that by 10,000 deaths. So, you're already looking at more people are going to die from unemployment, the indirect effects from unemployment than the coronavirus itself. So it's something that people do have to look into. And this is by no means saying that one is worth more than life. Why? Because both are about life. Right? They're both about life if you think about it. So I do think it's something that's very interesting to keep studying in, and I hope that you guys got a better idea from the former Swedish chief epidemiologist Johan Giesecke. All right, so that brings us into the praise part of the day, and we have two praise songs for you, and the two praise songs that I chose were Now We're Going Ahead. I'm going to play some really fast and cool songs. Just make it upbeat. Everyone can sing to it. Everyone knows these songs. The first one is Now We're Going Ahead. And the second one is Let's Go, The Time Has Come. These are two really fast and rock songs that everyone will really be able to dance and sing to. All right, so let's listen to some praise and sing along.
Finally, pushing ahead, our new songs move ahead of the world. Those worldly songs are no fading behind us. They're behind, falling even more towards death. God gave the melodies, the Spirit gave the words and lyrics. So I became the singer, and I sing the new songs. The songs of life are the new songs in this new time of life. Heaven's new songs overflow, going ahead of the world. Since you have now become the Trinity's counterparts of love. Sing the new songs, sing all the beautiful songs of these times. Sing the new songs, go on and sing along. Everyone sing along for all time until the world ends. Let's sing these eternal songs, songs of eternal love, now and always. Let's sing the new songs. The songs of life are the new songs in this new time of life. Heaven's new songs overflow, going ahead of the world. Since you have now become the Trinity's counterparts of love, sing the new songs, sing all the beautiful songs of these times. Sing the new songs, go on and sing along. Everyone sing along for all time until the world ends. Let's sing these eternal songs, songs of eternal love, now and always. Let's sing the new songs.
Come on, time to go now. Heaven's time has arrived now. Heaven is waiting and all those clouds of people too. They waited for this time. Do the right work at the right time. There is a brother God has given me. At that instant, don't miss the chance. Don't let time just pass you by. I always keep this proverb within my brain. It's engraved deep down in my bones. In all I do, everywhere that I may go, I take action. With the thoughts that come at each time, faster than light, I get it done. I always gain what I should gain.
And Let's Go, The Time Has Come was the first song, and then Now We're Going Ahead was the first one. I hope you guys enjoyed it and had a good time together dancing and singing and praising, which means now we're going to move on to a very important part of our podcast is going over the word or important things that we should understand here in this history. And the question I brought up first was, have you ever felt like you just wanted to stop doing like a job or a mission in church or something that you're responsible for? And I think everyone has gone through this. Like, the feelings you have is like the feeling of wanting to do it has gone somewhere else, or kind of like the fire has died down, and then you start to think that maybe it doesn't fit me, or maybe it is not the right thing for me. Firstly, I think there's two things that everyone needs to know. Is number one is you don't have to do it. That's number one, right? You don't. And number two is no one can force you to do it either. So those are two things you have to keep in mind, right? Now, this doesn't mean just drop it. This doesn't mean don't do anything and just all of a sudden forget it and then don't tell anyone and just stop it. But even though no one can force you and you don't have to do it, there's always a right way to deal with everything. And it's something that a lot of people are dealing with in their churches, in their work, in their families and such, where people just kind of drop it. And it kind of makes everyone else do more. And what I want to talk about today is what is the right way to deal with everything that we're doing? Or what's the right way to do it? Because even though this week is about taking action, the interesting thing is it doesn't mean just take action any way you want. We're supposed to take action the proper and the right way. So there's always a right way to deal with everything. And we always have to remember that we're always taught to look at multiple sides first and not make decisions on our own, but discuss them not only with the Lord, but with other people too. So even for myself, I went through this a lot. I used to be a head leader, a church leader in the past, very recently too. And this was one of the things that happened a lot in the church. It almost became like a normal thing, that this was a normal thing in Providence. I'm not sure if it was in other churches, but some people are telling me that this stuff happens everywhere. So people would take missions, they get inspired by it, or someone would ask them to do it, but then out of nowhere they just stop. All of a sudden you don't hear from them. And then when you finally talk to them, they say, I don't want to do it anymore. All of a sudden. And for me, it was kind of baffling because, we just stopped. And just doing it according to how we feel. Not really thinking about consequences, or even more how it affects other people, or even the way people look at you too, which is also important. It's an interesting situation because both sides have merit. And both sides have reasons for how they feel and what they do. So what I want to do is let's just talk about the situation and what can we do as members of this history to make harmony and peace in all situations. So remember one thing that Sunstream talked about in the message too, like a long time ago. He says, sometimes he would rebuke someone and then they'd be gone. Like they would be someone on the computer. They would be someone doing this or that responsibility. But after, one rebuke or a scolding, they're gone. Like you won't see them again. And that's one of the reasons why Pastor Joan was considered so special. She's never left. No matter how harsh or how big the rebuke was. Always came back to do her responsibility. No matter how hard it was. And the reason why the first thing we have to understand is the reason why feelings are not as important I'm talking about feelings are important, but they're not important in the long run. And the reason is because in the long run, feelings change all the time. It's like you could be thinking a certain way, but you'll realize more deeply later and you'll realize you were wrong, right? It's true. Sometimes we have the wrong thinking. Sometimes it's just a feeling, an emotional thing at that time because we are going through something at that moment, like even right now, coronavirus quarantine, it's affecting a lot of people's mentalities. But in the short term, what happens is those feelings or that thinking you have at that moment seems like the most important thing that matters in your life, and that's why you make your decision at that moment. So let me give an example. Let's pretend you're the manager at Starbucks or any store. What if someone only comes in when they feel like it? Or someone stops working in the middle of their shift because they don't feel that it's really good for them right then at that time. Like, what would you do? Would you be like going, oh, sure, I understand. Just go, leave anytime you want. Would you be like that? Or would you be kind of frustrated, like, excuse me? Like, wait. You just don't feel, like if you were sick, feeling really sick and stuff, it'd be different. But they just don't feel like it. So the first thing that we have to kind of assess in our hearts when we have this feeling or where we want to stop doing something is we have to understand the emotional. We're going to talk about our hearts. Because remember we learned about the soul. The soul entity has three parts: the mind, the heart, and the thoughts. But let's think about the heart, which is the emotional aspect of our brains, of our soul, right? The soul is the reason or the emotional part, if that's the reason why we quit or stop doing some things, like especially things that are our responsibility, the things you have to think in your head is feelings, thoughts, hearts, passions, these very emotional things, they're very subjective. They're super subjective. So honestly, feelings shouldn't be very high on the list of real reasons to stop or quit. It shouldn't be, because they keep changing, as I said before. Anything that is based on a feeling are very low on the list because they pass by in an instant, and you feel or think differently much later, and sometimes it leaves us in regret. So can you imagine if people did any of their responsibilities by feeling? Nothing would get done. Because honestly, how many people actually really feel like we should study for our exams? How many people actually feel I should go to the dentist, right? How many people actually feel I should, do sacrifice for my brother or sister? Sometimes you don't feel it. But everything goes and works because you realize this is what you call normal responsibility. It's a normal responsibility of a person, right? That's the first thing you have to assess in your mind is this just a feeling that's going to pass by? And that's why a lot of times many people just don't make decisions based on the feeling of the moment. This is why a lot of people make mistakes with things that they say, because they feel angry, so they let out a lashing of their tongue, and then they regret later because it was kind of in the spur of the moment, like a total emotional thing. The second thing you need to consider before you quit or stop doing something is seeing the other side. See, most times when people are in this type of emotional state, they have a feeling, they think one of two things. Number one is, they should be fine without me. Right? There's the first way of thinking. Yeah, oh no, they'll be fine. They'll be fine if I don't do it. They're doing fine with me anyways. And the second one is they just don't really care. They only care about what they think and what they're feeling. I just can't do this anymore. I don't care what's going to happen to any other people. And both of these thoughts are very dangerous. Why? Because number one, the first one is, they should be fine without me. This is assuming that they're not struggling already, and this is assuming that they can take on more work because you're not doing it, which is very unfair and very unreasonable to assume that everyone is fine, right? If you think about it, it is unfair. Just to assume that everyone should be fine with it without asking or discussing, it makes it, then you should flip the script then. Because if you flip the script, then why can't people just assume that you're fine with it too? This person's not struggling with doing this. They're not feeling bad about it. Yeah, I know. Because then you can assume both sides. Then everyone can just assume about each other. But reality is, when assumptions are made, you're usually really wrong. The second feeling we have, like I told you, is I don't care. I just can't do this anymore. When you do this attitude brings a lot of friction and animosity between both sides. Because the feeling is, when someone actually feels this way, it comes off as, I don't care about you. I only care about me. And this is why it can cause friction and animosity. And that's why seeing both sides is an important factor in life. And this is why, if you think about this, when you see both sides, a parent goes to work even if they're sick because they need to provide for their children. They see the other side. This is why a person will sacrifice going out late at night because they know that they have to wake up the next day for school because of an examination that will affect their grades in the test, which affects their graduation, right? So everyone has to be assessing both sides more than I want to do it. I feel like I want to do it. I feel this, I feel that. Lastly, the thing that's really important, I really believe that all of us have to think about right now, is not just the spiritual part is, do I feel, or is this something that I really want to do in my life? And the answer is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't actually, because it's about what true responsibility is. When you take on something, you're taking on responsibility, which is bigger than a feeling. It's an ideal. It's a moral principle that we need to uphold. It's your integrity, and it's how trustworthy you are. See, when you look in the world, when people who are irresponsible, they're not going to get hired for jobs. They're not going to be trusted, and they'll always have a hard time in life because they lack the integrity, and people are not going to trust them, which makes it so much harder for them. Responsibility means to do it because you understand the gravity of taking on this responsibility and understanding that this responsibility is shaping the relationships around you. The entire world, all people, all relationships are built on this trust. And without it, healthy relationships cannot exist. Now, does this mean you can't quit? And the answer is no. It doesn't. I'm not saying you can't quit. I'm not saying you can't stop. What I'm saying is, if you get to the point of, I think I need to do this, it has to be done properly. Properly. I'm dead serious, properly, because there's so many times people just quit. They don't say a thing, and then finally someone calls them later and says, hey, we haven't seen you in a while. Oh, I decided not to do it. And no one knows. And they're going to find out right then at that spot, which is totally unfair. Which means that to do it properly, you need to pray, you need to discuss, and you need to talk about it. Don't make decisions based on some current feeling or emotion, or you got to understand where it's coming from. Because what about because of this lockdown, being quarantined, you're not in the right emotional state? Just not at all. Like even for me, the first 3 weeks, on the third week, I was like snapping at people because I was so agitated, and I realized, wow, it's because I'm just stuck in a kennel. I feel like I'm in a zoo, and I'm the animal that people are looking at. So it's not worth it to base it on those emotions or feelings, because and even if you think to yourself, no, I really thought about it, you have to really think about it. Because if you really thought about it but you didn't discuss with anyone, and you just stopped doing it and waited for someone to call and then told them on the spot, then you didn't think properly, and it'll completely affect your credibility with other people, and it affects your future relationships. What's the proper way is, there's got to be discussion and talks. You got to see both sides. And then a decision is made. And then if you really, after looking at both sides, looking at yourself, is this just an emotional reaction because of something else that's happening? And if you still really, really want to stop, then you discuss, and you have to give notice. Not I stop now. This is why even at a regular job, everyone has to give minimum 2 weeks notice, because there needs to be time for someone to find someone else or get everyone prepared to start doing more work, right? That's what's normal. That's what's fair. And a lot of times when people want to stop, and if you realize it's just an emotional thing or something that's that you haven't really fully thought through on both sides, then a lot of times people will say, you know what, yeah, you're right. I'll do it for a little bit longer. Like, so if you think about this, life is already difficult. It is, right? Life is already difficult, and there's no need to make it more difficult. So in this history too, in order for this history to start blossoming, the more we take true responsibility with our missions and jobs in the world and in church, the better this history is going to run. And just like Sunsim too, he takes absolute responsibility regardless of the situation, regardless, even being in prison, right? He's like, oh, you still take it. And I'm sure he doesn't feel like it. But we too have to have the same mentality of the Lord and do things in the right way. And when we do it like this, then things begin to run a lot smoother, and there's less friction, animosity, and the awkwardness, where you may think to yourself that everything's okay, but it's actually not, because everyone else is thinking the exact opposite. All right. So I hope this kind of helps you guys out when it comes to dealing with each other in these different situations, which means that we're going to move into one of my songs of choice. And I'm going to choose another classic song from 1984. Well, actually, 1985 re-released. It's a group from Norway, and they debuted an album with this hit single, Take On Me. So all of you born in my generation know that this group is called Aha. And the reason why this song wasn't just on the top of the charts, but it received tons of exposure because of their innovative music video at that time, which was basically live and pencil sketched at the same time. So you got to go check it out. I'll post it up in the link. So we're going to listen to Aha from Norway, and we're going to listen to the single Take On Me. And that is Aha with Take On Me. I'm sure many of you are getting some memories blasts from the past with this song. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I hope that we can have many more requests. So if you guys have any songs of choice, requests, any song in the world, reminds you of the Lord, reminds you of anything, go ahead and send me a comment on the YouTube site. Cool. So that brings us to the member story of the day. Today's story comes from Los Angeles, California, from a member in the church. She's actually the associate leader. Her name is Talia, and this testimony is called How My Life Changed After Meeting the Messiah. So I'm sure everyone is going to have some big expectation from this. It's a great testimony, so everyone just listen, and let's listen to Talia's story. Today, I would like to give a testimony of how I changed after meeting the Messiah and the blessings I received after meeting him. I'll give a brief background of how my life was before meeting the Lord so you can see the changes. Before meeting the Lord, I was suicidal. I thought of killing myself a few times, but I just didn't have the strength to do it. The reason why was because I lived with an abusive aunt. You see, I left my family when I was 5 years old, and I moved to America with my aunt. My aunt was a bitter person who was emotionally, physically, and verbally abusive. She made me work at a restaurant ever since I was in junior high. I get picked up right after school, and I worked at the restaurant until 10 or 11 p.m. After that, I'd go home, do my homework, sleep, and repeat every day. On weekends and holidays, I'd work from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. And my aunt never asked once if I was okay. I had to work, even if I was sick, and even if I was in pain. Whenever she was stressed out or angry, she would take it out on me because I was the youngest one in the family and I couldn't run away. Years of abuse, neglect, and hard work made me into a bitter and hateful person. I was bitter and hateful towards life, towards people, and towards myself. I was bitter towards God, and I wondered why he made me live this kind of life. On the outside, I would always smile. But on the inside, I was an emotionally broken person. There was always this sorrow in my heart, and I always felt this deep loneliness that I couldn't get rid of. So I would often cry to myself. I really didn't believe there was love in this world because I didn't experience any. When I was in college, my life situation was a little bit better. My aunt was still abusive, but I didn't have to work at the restaurant anymore. At that time, I was earnestly searching for the truth and love. I was searching for the deep truth of God, and I was also searching for someone who would love me sincerely with a never-changing heart. That was when I met the Lord. The Lord who is so loving, so kind, so caring, and so perfect. It took me a while, but I realized that he was the love that I've been searching for all my life, and his love healed me of my pains. Not only was I healed, but he took away my loneliness and my sadness. He changed me, a person who was hardened and hateful, into a person who loves lives. He also blessed me abundantly financially. I was physically poor all my life, and the Lord blessed me to the point where there was nothing that I needed or wanted, at least physically. I couldn't remember ever feeling truly happy before, but now I live with hope and joy every day. I'm so truly thankful that I met this history and the Messiah and be able to listen to this word. Through sincerely taking action on his word, my life completely changed. I'm so grateful for his love, so grateful for his word that I made a vow to live the rest of my life loving Him and doing His work. The only thought I have now is, how can I help Him fulfill God's will? How can I bring more lives to this history? And how can I testify more for the Lord? The only prayer I have is for everyone to live loving the Trinity and the Lord with a never-changing heart, just as they loved us. For someone who is so poor in life, so poor in love, in spirit, the Lord gives so much blessings, and He's still giving. God, the Holy Spirit, and the Lord, I will love you until the day I die and for eternity in heaven. I will also live loving lives as with your love and with your heart. Amen. So I hope that, even for me, as I listen to these testimonies from around the world, I think that's one of the things that it was so hard to see the presence of God in my life sometimes when it's difficult. But when I started this program for hearing member stories, wow, it's so amazing to see God working in everyone's life. And I hope that you guys too will realize, in the moments where it's so dark, in the moments where you feel that God is not there, we got to remember, through other people's testimonies, He is there. He really is there. And when I hear these stories from people around the world, man, you can't help but know that God is working in so many people's lives. So I hope that a lot of you will be inspired continuously by these stories. Send in your stories, because I'm telling you right now, no matter how small or how insignificant you think your story is, it is going to affect someone, because someone has been in that situation. All right? So please send your stories in, and hopefully we'll be able to touch other people's lives also. So I hope that everyone has had a wonderful day today on today's podcast. And the music's going to start, which basically means that we are going to end it here. I hope that everyone is going to have a wonderful Tuesday, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow. Everyone, God bless. This is the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
Believe in yourself and believe that somebody.
Gotta believe in yourself. Cause no one else will.
You have the power